So these are three state management libraries with similar or the same goal in terms of preventing extra re-renders. But the preventing external re-render is one of the goals of state management libraries. And while having the common goal among those three, they take different approaches in terms of how we structure state and how we manage state. And let's say Zastan is more like a global store, a global variable. And Jotai is like defining functions to define state. And Valtio is like just JavaScript objects. So those are a different model to manage state, and that's the key differences. I guess Next.js plays a great role in this field. I would say Waku is not trying to beat it, but like we want to like coexist. We need to. I think Waku needs to find a good place in the community. So I'm not sure if I envision something clear, but there must be some relatively smaller place where Waku can play well. If we, let's say, find it, we'll focus on it, making the framework more specialized. Not specialized, but like focusing on it. Basically, one of the good example is Zastan. Zastan is trying to be small and minimal. So basically, we do not accept any new features. So we reject everything. So that's easy. But others, or usually the difficulty of rejecting PR is it's hard to see the contributors' background.
Mm-hmm.
If a contributor is somewhat experienced, I can communicate with them in a way that there are a specific reason. I know they know, so I can reject in a way somewhat logically.
Mm-hmm.
But for some time, a contributor might be opening a pull request for the first time in their life. In that case, I wanted to be somewhat polite so that they are not discouraged about contributing to the open source itself. So I feel some kind of responsibility not to discourage their mind. So that's the hard part. And especially recently, we have AI coding, AI assistant.
Mm-hmm.
It's much harder to tell if such a pull request is from a beginner contributor or an experienced contributor.
Today on Seniors at Scale, we're diving deep into state management at scale with someone who's redefined how React developers think about global state. Daishi Kato is the author and maintainer of Zustand, Jotai, and Valtio, three of the most widely used state management libraries in modern React. He's also behind Waku, a framework built around React server components, pushing the boundaries of how we structure and ship React apps. Daishi has been building up modern open source tools for nearly a decade, balancing simplicity with scalability. Welcome, Daishi. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
So let's get right in it. What's the main difference between Zustand, Jotai, and Valtio?
Well, yes, by the way, I call it Zastan, Jotai, and Valtio. But anyway.
Wait, what? How's the normal pronunciation?
I'm not sure if it's normal, but what I pronounce is Zastan, Jotai, Valtio. Anyway, so these are three state management libraries with similar or the same goal in terms of preventing extra re-renders. But the preventing external re-render is one of the goals of state management libraries. And while having the common goal among those three, they take different approaches in terms of how we structure state and how we manage state. And let's say Zastan is more like a global store, a global variable. And Jotai is like defining functions to define state. And Valtio is like just JavaScript objects. So those are a different model to manage state, and that's the key differences.
Interesting. So what first motivated you to start building open source libraries like Zustand or Jotai?
I was doing some toy projects or some toy open source projects before for a long time, and when I saw the announcement of React hooks, I got so excited, and this should be a good place to play with. So I started developing a bunch of React hooks libraries, and somehow I picked global state, how to say, the field
Mm-hmm.
to explore. This is because um, I had used Redux, and but more importantly, I wasn't doing I wasn't good. I am not good at doing component and styling or those stuff, and I would like to do something off look and feel. So
Mm-hmm.
global state is more like logic. So it's a great field for me. Yeah, that's the beginning. I developed several related libraries to address global state things, including React context.
That's very cool. And you mentioned Redux. How does Zastan differ philosophically from Redux?
Philosophically, it's very different and it's very similar. It's similar that its message is single global store. It's different in that sense that Redux is basically reducers.
Mm-hmm.
Zastan is not, so it's pretty different in that sense.
And Jotai takes a very different approach, like with atoms. How did this concept evolve?
First of all, Jotai is very different in that it's like global store, but it's more like a set of atom definitions, which I think is just functions. So the way you structure a state is very different. While Zastan is a single store, Jotai is a set of functions. And if I were to tell the story behind Jotai, previously, as I said, I did some exploration with React context using use reducer or use state. And my approach was to use JavaScript proxies. And when it had gone well, somewhat well, and it was one of my major product after a few years of exploring. But then I realized that it's not like it didn't get a lot of traction, and I assumed and I heard from somebody one of the reasons is the usage of JavaScript proxies. So I was looking for some alternative approaches that doesn't require JavaScript proxies, and I didn't have great idea for some time until I learned Facebook announced Recoil. At first, I thought that was the API that I was looking for, and at first I thought it's good, and at the same time I don't need to do anything. So they have it. They have a solution.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to continue working on it. But eventually, after learning some more details of their APIs, I wanted something different. And yeah, that was the beginning. So on one hand, I learned the API from Recoil, but on the other hand, that was a problem I had been exploring for some years using proxies. And the Atom model is, I feel, a good abstraction without using proxies. By the way, I forgot to mention that the reason why I used proxies is because I wanted to avoid the usage of selectors, which is
Mhm.
pretty popular with Redux and Zastan. And I wanted to a solution without using selectors for the goal of render optimization. And other models was great so that it allows render optimization without selectors, without proxies.
That's pretty cool. But I think Valtio introduces proxy-based reactivity
Exactly.
anyway, right?
Yeah, that brings me to the another story. After releasing Zastan Jotai, we had an idea of using proxies again, and I I had a hesitation because, as I said, I learned JavaScript proxies are not welcomed by everyone, and so my approach, like before Jotai or before Zastan, my approach was to hide the hide proxies as an implementation detail. But the idea of Virtue is different. It's more at that time the proxies are well recognized, and it was okay to say this library is for using proxies extensively. So I changed the way to describe the library completely different. Instead of hiding the usage as an implementation detail, we say it's our proxy. That was my how they say the idea. That was the idea I originally gave up. But now we can say this is a proxy. We use the technique that I have developed a few years ago, and now it was back when we
So it's
started
more
Virtual.
because proxies are cool now. Now it works because people like proxies.
Some people like proxies, yes. Some people like proxies. Not everyone, I assume.
So how does Vartio compare with MobX, like in terms of developer experience?
Oh, that was that it's a great question because when I had the idea of Virtual, the other hesitation of mine was that the MobX library already existed. So from the technical perspective, I wasn't sure. I was going to be providing new capabilities compared to MobX, and that was my hesitation to continue actually releasing it. But then I remembered one thing that MobX doesn't provide hook API. They use observer,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I had previously had a discussion with MobX team about providing hooks API, but after that they didn't provide that. So I thought it's an opportunity to how do you say provide a library. So that a difference from MobX. Virtual is hook based API.
When would you not recommend people use Virtue?
If people don't. So
So can you read that?
it exactly. Yeah, as I said, proxies are now shown. It's not hidden, meaning the developers have to understand they are using proxies. So if it doesn't fit with their mental model, it's not a good fit.
Yeah, makes sense. So moving now to Waku, I think very popular at this time is React Server Components. Waku builds on React Server Components. How did that project start?
Yeah, it's another great question. So after releasing those three state management libraries, they were mostly stable. So they didn't have big project to explore. So I wanted to do something new. And yeah, I don't remember exactly when I decided to start working on it because it was pretty challenging to tackle into the React server component space, but it started as an experiment. My motivation was how like other state management library can play with React server components, and I needed to learn how React server components work. And then so it was my personal project, and I released it as a playground. Eventually, someone said, "Yeah, this is gonna be interesting." So I decided to make it my, let's say, fourth project to put my effort in. And that was a start.
Interesting. And what kind of applications is Waku best suited for?
Well, it's basically general purpose React server components, but in terms of focusing on explaining the usage to people, we say it's for like small to medium sized web application, and or it's suited for static site, because it's easier to understand building a static site using React server components. And it's I would say it's the first step. Then we introduce the server as the next step in terms of the complexity of the framework.
And how do you envision Waku evolving as React server components are becoming more and more mainstream in today's world?
Well, it's a hard question. I guess Next.js plays a great role in this field, and I would say Waku is not trying to beat it, but like we want to like coexist. We need to. I think Waku needs to find a good place in the community. So I'm not sure if I envision something clear, but there must be some relatively smaller place where Waku can play well. If we, let's say, find it, we'll focus on it, making the framework more specialized. Not specialized, but like focusing on it.
That's cool. I hope it does. Do you think that creating Waku and maintaining Waku change your way of thinking about client-side state?
Yeah, kind of, because before that, I had no idea how things work on the server, including server-side rendering. And now I have a much better understanding of how React server components work and server-side rendering works. I haven't changed anything yet in terms of the capability of client state management libraries. But since I learned the broader world, the problem space, that's definitely give me some insights.
So you're working on 4 very popular open source libraries. How do you handle like the mental load of doing this?
Yeah, it's kind of challenging, and basically I'm now focusing on Waku. So the other 3 are more or less in I wouldn't say maintenance mode, but it's more stable. So I do not spend much time on exploring something new, except that actually I do some. But basically I I prioritize things and
So
work on
Waku is
them
the focus right now.
right now. But I
And
do still maintain others and adding more. Happy to add more features.
so what's the hardest decision you've made about rejecting a feature request for one of your libraries?
Basically, one of the good example is Zastan. Zastan is trying to be small and minimal. So basically, we do not accept any new features. So we reject everything. So that's easy. But others, or usually the difficulty of rejecting PR is if it's hard to see the contributors' background.
Mm-hmm.
If a contributor is somewhat experienced, I can communicate with them in a way that there are specific reason. I know they know, so I can reject in a way somewhat logically.
Mm-hmm.
But for some time, a contributor might be opening a pull request for the first time in their life. In that case, I wanted to be somewhat polite so that they are not discouraged about contributing to the open source itself. So I feel some kind of responsibility not to discourage their mind. So that's the hard part. And especially recently we have AI coding, AI assistant.
Mm-hmm.
It's much harder to tell if such a pull request is from a beginner contributor or an experienced contributor.
That makes
It's
sense.
pretty tricky.
Do you think React should have its own built-in state management?
Well, I do not, because if it were, my old project will be gone or have sense to exist. But I don't know if React has some built-in state manager, community-wise, it might benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But my personal opinion is not, because I like more like competitive,
Yeah,
community, which we can try various things.
that's true. What has been your favorite community contribution so far?
You know what? When I started open source projects, I did it because I like coding. But many people say to be successful with open source project, we need more documentation than coding. Documentation is important and coding is less important, but I like coding. So I'm pretty happy to have many contributions to improve our documentation so that I can focus on coding. That actually happens to Zustand. You might be able to believe it, but until it some great traction from the community, Zastan doesn't have any documentation or documentation site other than one single README Markdown file. And then someone said it's too weird not to have a documentation site. So I think it's what we have now is totally community based. So yeah, I feel it's a great thing on thinking open source projects communities.
Yeah, so if you're thinking of doing open source, try starting with documentation. I think those PRs are easily going to get accepted
Yeah.
for my listeners. So how do you decide when a problem deserves like a new library versus improving an existing library?
Well, for me, I mean, it's more. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is a common sense or many people think about it. But my motivation for this open source field is that I wanted to create something. Yeah, I do. I do contribute to other projects, but my focus is creating something my own. It's just a goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's the goal of it's the origin of my way of doing things.
Good too. Wanted to ask more on Zustand. Zustand's API feels like minimal, but also very, very powerful, right? What principles guided its design? How did you manage to make it so tiny and powerful?
We wanted to make it small and tiny, and yeah, that was the whole point of the library. But what was good is that the middleware system in Zastan was pretty powerful. It's too powerful, I guess. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how how it became this shape, but Yeah, we care most is the minimal core, but people want some more features. So we need a way to extend the capability. So like it's a necessity to have a extendable system.
Zustand completely ignores React context. Can you tell us why?
Well, I think it's a misconception because the requirement of React context is that we use state in a higher level component. And Zustand or some other state libraries are stored outside of React. If we have a store outside React, we do not use state and we do not need to use context. But it was a convention to use React context. Actually, there was a funny story. Before Zastan, I made a small library just like Zastan, and it uses a store outside React, and it subscribes directly to it, so it doesn't require React context. I had a feedback from one of the users saying, "Isn't it a best practice to use React context for such global state use case?" So at that point, I shared the opinion, and I changed my library so that it uses React context, but it was still using the external store. After that, I thought it's well, that was because when many people think that global state is use state. So I guess that was a misconception at that time, and I wasn't I wasn't well thought for enough. So I wasn't thought enough to convince people that it's not a necessity. Now Zastan was, I think it's a pioneer to show the usage of not using React context, and it uses the global external store.
So, what are the main trade offs between Jotai and Zustand in real world apps?
This is a reason why I started Jotai while having Zastan, because obviously the first idea was to add the capability of something I wanted in Jotai to Zastan. For one, we want Zastan to be minimal, so we didn't want to add new features. For another, I guess it was a slightly conflicting idea because Jotai is more like use state, and use state is more appropriate for concurrent rendering. Concurrent rendering and external store are kind of conflicting concept, maybe until the near future. So back to the question, the Jotai was developed to be more to React based practices. And that was not technically possible in Zastan.
Makes sense. So, what role did React's primitive like use sync external store play in your libraries?
Yes, we didn't have use sync external store before until React 18. And Zastan was exactly trying to do what use sync external store does in a user land in a limited way. So the biggest contribution of Zastan until React 17 was to provide the subscription mechanism with use effect. But now use sync external store is provided by React. Zastan implementation is just using use sync external store. So it's a great contribution from the library. It's too great that it doesn't make much sense for me, at least for me, to have to to
Did it make the library even smaller now that you
yes, it's
sync
even
external?
smaller. It's like a few lines of code in terms of subscribing to the store using the hook.
So now that Zustan has like such a huge ecosystem, how do you maintain consistency across community packages?
I think it's a challenging problem. I'm not sure if we are able to maintain compatibility between various ecosystem libraries. But yeah, let's see. Yeah, we have some basic middleware, so those are good. But I guess the point is that, as we discussed, the Zastan middleware system, or Zastan is such a small library, people understand its behavior well. So naturally, the compatibility is kind of preserved by nature. So the answer is I didn't do anything special.
Do you plan to unify concepts between Zustand and your other libraries?
Yeah, many people ask that. I guess if I were to do it, I would lose some tractions, because for those who like Zastan, they like it small. They they like the small library, so that they can continue maintaining it if the project is even finished. If we integrate more complexity into it, they lose this benefit. And for others, like Valtio is pretty different from the other two, and combining them is like mixing immutable state and mutable state, and it's a conceptual conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's that's why we separate them into 3 libraries.
Makes sense. So, what's your plan for the future, for next year with your libraries and
But
for
for the
you
next
yourself?
year, my focus will remain developing Waku. We should be able to release V1 alpha soon. We should get more feedback. I hope to get more feedback, so including bug report and feature request. So that will keep me busy for the next year. But but I would like to work on some libraries on top of Waku, because Waku is such a small framework. It doesn't, and it's capable of extending the features. It's a small library. It's a small framework, and we expect to build an ecosystem. So I wanted to build libraries. I wanted to be a library author rather than framework author. So I want to spend more time building libraries once it's settled.
And which one would you use in Waku? One of the if you had to implement state.
Yeah, I think Jotai is a good model, because the other two are stores. Jotai is like abstraction of state, which means we can use the same abstraction on the client, on the server.
No, that's cool. Thank you for this. One final question that I ask for everyone that joins. Can you tell me one of your favorite books that you can recommend my readers, my listeners?
Before JavaScript, I learned Scheme. There was a language called Scheme, and there is a book called SICP. I don't remember. SICP, structured something. It's a textbook used in MIT or some other universities.
Amazing.
So it's a basic, yeah, it's a text.
So cool. Thank you so much, Daishi. Thank you so much for joining me. I think everyone learned so much about open source, about state management. It has been a pleasure. Hope to see you again in around the conference scene. And good luck with Waku.
It's a pleasure for me too. Thank you.